it sounds like, just by the atmosphere in the room, that we're ready for the third Splice.
Hey!
Thank you, each and every one of you, for coming. It means a lot. We're really excited to keep this rolling and keep it going. And your presence is very much appreciated. So keep on coming out, and we love you. All right. So we're going to go ahead and get the show on the road, yeah? First up, we're going to have our own Sean F. Monroe come up to introduce Ariel Francisco. Sean, come ahead.
All right. As a poetry citizen of Louisiana, I am delighted to have you, Ariel, join the crew and scene of the state. It's exciting to have some new people pop in to the state every now and then, Dig it. Ariel Francisco's poems atomize immediate spaces and actions into visceral meditations that imbue physical reality with the full splendor of meaning, empathy, and inquiry. The poet, the speaker, the entity in his poems captures time and space to digest the untapped magic services that surround us. In his distinctly American poems, he crafts exacting hyperbolic images that dance with bitterness and the epiphanic miracles from a sustained attention on life and the materials in it. His poems wield a cosmic array of weirdness made ordinary, and ordinary made weird. Ariel Francisco is the author of Under Capitalism, If Your Head Aches, They Just Yank Off Your Head, from Flowersong Press, coming out this year. A Sinking Ship is Still a Ship, from Burrow Press in 2020. And All My Heroes Are Broke, from C&R Press in 2017. A poet and translator born in the Bronx to Dominican and Guatemalan parents and raised in Miami, his work has been published in the New Yorker, American Poetry Review, Academy of American Poets, Poem a Day, the New York City Ballet, Latino Book Review, and elsewhere. He is assistant professor of poetry at Louisiana State University in Baton Rouge. Please welcome to Splice, Ariel Francisco.
All right. Thank you. Can you guys hear me? Am I speaking into the microphone? Cool. Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction, and thank you everyone for coming out. This is the first time I'm reading in person in almost a year, so forgive me if I maybe stumble a little bit. It's all been Zoom, and I'm kind of over reading on Zoom, so it is very nice to be in person. I'm going to read a few poems for you guys. This first one is a bit long. It's called Insomniami, and this is like a 10-page poem. I'm currently trying to make it like a book-length poem, so we'll see if that drives me insane over the next year. But it's just kind of a long, fragmented piece about Miami, where I grew up, and climate change and not being able to sleep. So this is Insomniami. All night, darkness constructs its unquestioning citadel of intrusive thoughts. If you listen closely, you can hear the rising water's whispers. If you cover your ears, you'll hear it too. Trapped in the seashell of night, chase the echo to its origin. A useless lullaby, a rhythm replacing the unticking digital clocks, counting my sleeplessness in silence. The shapelessness of waves, a watery sleep paralysis gripping the city. The high water mark is reaching for the sky and getting there. New high-rises rise every day like sharp teeth, a fire sale. Get it while it's hot, get that land while it's still land. The world is burning, you know. All night you can hear them building another goddamn stadium while tearing down the house around you as you sleep. Enough empty seats for the displaced, an uncheering home crowd longing for home. Enough hollow condos for everyone, but it's important that they stay empty. They won't say why. Hurricanes come through like tourists, and suddenly there are less homeless people, their names lost to the larger one of Christian chaos. Night is a rosary of unanswered hours. Count them, count them, count them. Sometimes I'm grateful for the light pollution. The smug stars think they know everything, but their slow knowledge is always late with its light. Still, I consult the disdainful horoscope to see what they promise to promise. Miami is obviously a Leo, look it up. A drowning fire sign, pride pretending everything is fine. I mean, come on. A backwards place. You can't blame everything on the Bermuda Triangle, but you can try. Swimming birds and flying fish, burrowing owls, night sky reflected in the water, becoming confused, a broth of clouds and corals. Octopus conspire against us, limb brains learning from our mistakes. Our heirs come too soon. Certainly they'll do better with this city than we did. This city with its history of hurricanes and fraud. One day the neon will burn out, and then what? Sun rises like rent. Sun rises like a flag. Sun rises like the ocean. I can't sleep, but the city I love can't wake up.
Yeah.
Thank you. I love Miami, but I'm also a huge hater of Miami just because I think I lived there for too long. And this whole book is pretty much about kind of hating on it and on Florida in general, but in hopefully an endearing way, I think. This is a poem I wrote when I was in my graduate program, and I went for poetry, and they made us take a cross-genre workshop, which I was a little ambivalent about, so I wrote this poem after fiction workshop because I was in a bad mood. It's called Eating Dinner Alone at the 163rd Street Mall. As a kid, I wanted to be the first man on Mars, pictured myself planting the stars and stripes into the God of War's face for all the universe to see, becoming immortal. I never imagined myself at 26 grabbing a slapdash dinner after class at the half-abandoned 163rd Street Mall, a break from bargain hunting because it has both a Ross and a Marshall's, among the bootleg shops, the vacant spaces, the coming soons that will never be. It's just me and the cashier of the Floridian, the singular night in what passes for a food court. And my order echoes through the wide halls, the three-storied ceiling, the way a death rower's last meal request must flood the stale air of his concrete cell. I pay in change and take my styrofoam container of mismatched island food to a table surrounded by kiddie rides, hungry for coins. A killer whale, sad as the real thing wasting away at SeaWorld, and beyond it, a gleaming white rocket ship with a glowing top and a strange futuristic voice calling out to me, saying, please insert coin, please insert coin. And for a moment I smile, consider cramming my adult body into that tiny command center, knees to chest, elbows tucked, let the rocking seize my imagination into ascent, up through the Earth's atmosphere until the sunlight falls away, and all that's left is the naked sphere surrounded by the blackness of space. But the machine's constant plea reminds me that I'm doomed to be earthbound, star-crossed, having spent my last quarters on this cold jerk chicken, rice, and beans. Thank you. There's a few poems in here about hurricanes. Down in Miami, we got hit pretty bad the same year as Katrina. We got Katrina and Wilma, and then there was another one. And then we didn't get hit by a hurricane for like more than another decade, so we kind of got in the habit of just sort of, we would see it on the news and be like, it's not gonna hit us. And then in like 2016, I think, or 2017, we got hit by a few, and it was kind of odd because we kind of got used to sort of brushing it off, and so me and my roommate were pretty unprepared. So this is a poem about a hurricane from that year, and it takes its title from a news headline. So presumably it's true, but to be honest, I didn't fact check it. It's called Ruins of Earliest Church in America Discovered in Florida. Hurricane Matthew missed us, but really fucked up St. Augustine. Tore out a shopping mall to reveal a 500-year-old skeleton, folded arms pressed against his chest, head facing east, staring down the storm that let the air wash over him once again. Is there anything more Florida than being buried under a church that will be buried under a shopping mall that will be ripped open by a hurricane named after one of the 12 apostles? All I know is I don't want to die here, but if I do, bury me so deep that no one ever finds me. Listen, I know you can't dig very far into the Florida ground, but please promise me that when your shovel breaks the final limestone and splashes dark water, you'll keep digging. And this is another short hurricane poem just before Hurricane Irma, which I don't know how they measure hurricanes, but apparently that was the biggest hurricane that the people who measure them have ever measured. So that was pretty terrifying. This is called On the Eve of the Largest Hurricane Ever Recorded, my ex tells me she hopes I don't die, and I mean, like, whatever. There's a howling that barrels through the lonely static of night. I've got enough canned soup to drown myself in. My phone lights up with tornado warning after tornado warning, an escort of destruction dancing around a 3-mile radius. Just now, the power goes out like a deep inhale after a gut punch. This is unexpected. Your words, I mean. I hold them like a dimming candle. Not enough for warmth, but it's something. In this darkness, I can at least allow myself this one tiny truth. This next one, so my dad's a poet also. He writes in Spanish, and I began to develop an interest in translating poetry, and I thought, oh, well, I'll translate my dad's poems because we get along and we talk. And somehow my stupid brain forgot that my parents divorced when I was a kid, and that my dad might have written about that, and that I might not want to encounter that. So it was a very strange experience. It's called Translating My Dad's Love Poems. It's after Yusef Kumunyaka. It must have been '98, my mom leaving for work, the first night she doesn't kiss my dad goodbye. He closes the door softly, walks slowly to his office, and takes a hammer to the keyboard of his computer as though desperately trying to build something until the letters fly through the air, struggling to form the words he cannot. I watch from my childish quiet, unnoticed, unsure of how much time passes before he labors over the scattered keys, scooping them up with small hesitation like a man collecting seashells and striving to pop them back into place, to remember where each one belongs. I am so much like my father, and so I too fear love, how I will inevitably fail it, mishandle it, let it fall from my hands, too fragile to survive intact. Years later, I think of him hunched over that keyboard, the same one he used to write the poems I'm now translating, bent over my own computer, alone in my apartment, his words my inheritance, dim foreshadowing. He writes, today I will not think of you. Today I will not think of you. Today I will not think of you. I'll just read a couple more. Called Don't Ever Come to Florida. And I got the title from this. It was I believe it was a postcard from Jack Kerouac, who was living in Orlando at the time, to Allen Ginsberg. And that's all it said. It was just all caps, don't ever come to Florida. And I was like, this guy's got the right idea. Don't ever come to Florida. Think of Ponce de Leon, that idiot who thought the fountain of youth was real, and worse, thought it was in Florida of all places, this great rotting flower. The natives said, fuck you, get out of here, with poisoned arrows when he tried to colonize, took one to the thigh and retreated towards his end, lying on his back as the ship sailed to Cuba, watching the green coastline of his dreams fade to blue and then fixed in black. Think of Bob Marley taking his last breath in the cold air of a Miami hospital, or Jack Kerouac vomiting blood up in St. Petersburg after a pre-noon malt liquor and whiskey. You'd think he would have known better by then. Or Hart Crane off the coast of the Gulf, leaning on the rail of a boat before he jumped or fell, or the water reached up and grabbed him by the neck itself. Think of Anna Nicole Smith, OD'd in her hotel room in Hollywood, pitiful little town actually named after the one in California, disappointing child. Or, best of all, think of Al Capone, proof of the old cliche that nothing is assured to us but death and taxes, The latter, his first demise. The former, of course, what waits for us all. Think of his syphilis brain, pocked with holes like the limestone skeleton of the state slowly filling with water. And I'll end with this one. Thank you again so much for having me and for coming out. This is the first poem in this book, and I have a couple copies of both of these if anyone's interested. And this is, again, just kind of, being a huge hater of where I come from, but also loving it very much. This is called Spring Break Forever. Perhaps lounging on the long corner of the Bermuda Triangle is why people don't see the swell, a magic shroud vanishing the obvious. Maybe the famous sun is too bright and blinding. Maybe a little sand in their eyes blurring their vision, a little salt. Are the beaches more crowded this year? Soon there will only be room enough for people to stand side by side facing the ocean's onslaught, like those blindfolded before a firing squad. And still they'll say how nice it is to visit, how beautiful all that water. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ariel. That was wonderful. All right, so we have our second featured reader tonight from Florida, no less. We'll see what the retort is. Introducing Sandra Simonds is Splice's own Rodrigo Toscano. Rodrigo.
I don't know how she does it, but she does it consistently and spectacularly. She collapses socially determined exteriorities onto pressurized visionary internalities that are so flush, weld seams can't be found unless she puts one there. Sandra Simonds' poetics is a contact zone between those two forces, centrifugal and centripetal. The whoosh in, the whoosh out. It's like she conjures up poetic succubi and incubi that slink, comfortably discomfited, between the sheets of some you in the world and the world itself as it worlds on. There's others under there, a historical materialist Baudelaire, a re-throttled De Prima, and many more. And if the overlord of these our domestic shores is the techno-feudalist, late capitalist granite reality we bang our heads on continuously, then here is the slink around the wall poetics. Her poetic acts are simultaneously just out of reach, surging towards new horizons, and at the same time, they're tucked tight, generous, and tingly. Sandra has come to battle for devotion to the outdoors, plants, animals, big people, little people, the sky, water, hometowns, the global mass of whomever, and all towards a haler, more strident, committed, mask-off poetic politics. Sandra Simonds is an award-winning author of 7 books of poetry, Atopia, Orlando, Further Problems with Pleasure, winner of the 2015 Akron Poetry Prize from the University of Akron Press, Steal It Back, the Sonnets, Mother Was a Tragic Girl, and Warsaw Bikini. Her poems have been published in The New Yorker, The New York Times, and Best American Poetry in 2015 and 2014, and have appeared in many literary journals, including Poetry, the American Poetry Review, the Chicago Review, and Granta. She lives in Tallahassee, Florida, and is an associate professor of English and Humanities at Thomas University in Thomasville, Georgia. Here's Sandra Simonds.
Rodrigo. It's great to be. Is there a way? Can we make this a little taller or? excited to be here. I love New Orleans, and it's great to see old friends, especially Rodrigo, whose poetry I admire so much. And Ariel, hopefully new friends as well. It was lovely. So I'm going to read from a new manuscript that it's going to come out with Wave Books in November. So it's called Triptychs, and maybe you can see they're in columns. So there are three sort of poems side by side. So I'll just let you know which column I'm reading so it's not too confusing, because I think it's good to see them. I don't know, I guess up there you can't see it, but they're just three columns. And this first one I wrote in the Everglades, and it is a poem that features Esther Greenwood, and if you've read The Bell Jar, then you would know she's the protagonist of that novel. So it's called Reading the Bell Jar in the Everglades National Park. When Esther Greenwood is almost raped, why can't she connect what happened to her downward spiral from throwing designer clothes off the hotel balcony to her unwashed hair, electroshock therapy, and worse? Slut, the guy kept saying, slut, 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 where's my diamond, slut? In 6th grade science class, there was a boy who liked to light the hair of girls on fire. The science teacher laughed, ha, ha, ha. She didn't believe us when we told her, ha, 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 until the smell of Heidi's burned braid mixed with the chalk powder that fell off the enormous grave green board. This is the second column. It rained all day. Then I read your poetry. I lied twice, first when I told you I wasn't afraid of rain, and then when I put it in the poem. So I unfolded the piece of paper where the poem was and wrote a true story. 8 or 10 vultures on top of a Corolla pecking at a blue tarp in the Everglades National Park. The Everglades National Park provided their visitors. I texted Alex, vultures are the bird form of roaches. Then one of them looked at me. There were vultures everywhere. In the swimming pool, vomiting, shitting, blood, blood, blood. It was gross, said Mrs. Delamo, who bought a $700,000 vacation home in West Palm where the birds invaded. It wouldn't stop looking. All the other birds were pecking away at the blue tarp to get to the windshield wipers, which apparently gives off the scent of a carcass when the plastic melts in the sun. Save me, save me, save me, I said to the vulture, but it wouldn't look away. This is the third column. My name is Esther Greenwood. Sometimes I get a bad idea and I follow through on it. That's the difference between me and other people. Other people get distracted by roasting a chicken or watching TV, but I am carnal. I know the difference between killing yourself and stepping down the spiral staircase into the cellar of the self, that really meaty, stringy place wrapped in shadows, booming with an arterial pulse, so that if you were to kill it, it would mean something. Now, look at me. Look at the mirror I'm holding up. You can smash it. There's another face behind it and another one behind that. Just like the stars, they're endless and stretch obliviously in their cold calculations. It is Christmas Eve, so go ahead, smash it. I'm sure someone out there is in love with me. This one is called I Gave Birth in Another Era. This is the first column of that. Woke to the mean error of birds squawking inside the blue, gray, black polyphony of what happens when we lose the terminology to determine how bad things really are. Was there no way to puncture the agonizing film, keeping us all corralled here? I looked through the window, bewildering axiom, condition, assumption. I looked at the dwarf orange trees, fruiting sour fruit incessantly. Second column. Suppose it is possible to be in 3 states of error at once, and in each place to think 3 things, and in each thing to feel a different version of the salted wind as you are walking along the high sea cliff. Take, for example, apricots, which have been genetically bred to amplify the length of time their fragrance stays in the crisp air of the cadaverous supermarket. Just long enough to place them in your cart and think to yourself, the world is good. You may be very lonely at this point. The grocery clerk scans the apricots and asks you a few questions to which the answers are always no. This is the third one. When will the coronavirus be over? Asked the griever, who's a very small child in the room we have painted Amalfi blue, but have not yet filled with sea-themed decor. How much of a garden's design is made more beautiful through negative space? Across from the entry for grief is grenade, which derives from the old French word for pomegranate. Why do I write poetry? Because I don't know what it means to live anymore other than the left behind shapes. Why do I write poetry? Because I want to drown. Okay, this is kind of a sound poem in a way. The first column, though, maybe this will help to tell you this. The first column was a meditation on fire. The second column was on water, and the third one was on air. And so this is the first one. And the poem's called Let's Make the Water Turn Black. Maybe you recognize the song title. So this is the first one. Pyres of brush as anagram, as spontaneous combustion, cloud filling with wind vectors, blasts of char in my aorta, aerial fuels, how feelings are an anchor point on the aspect, a single tree dead. You were the wild mechanism of the vortex columns ascending through a crown of pines and blinding the absolute forbs. Oh, molecules of blue echolocation ground down to stumps, forgive me. I have built our love on the fire line between strata, the grasses smoldering, ta-ta, my radiant burn. You are the apex, a charisma, a seed, seer, Edenic source text, exit, woo, round, wound round, woe, the two-way radio waves, a frequency never quenched. It is not me. Searing on the scaffold. It is not me inside the excruciating landscape's crux and hex. I cannot hold you dear anymore, dear tangential rope, but what bright christenings you bring into swirling conflagrations, red flags flapping in the red fire, where the terrible climactic descent is dissected by an atmospheric death, an apotheosis of form retracting one more minute, the guru says, torching as voluptuous underburn, tender water erasing the rocks, tender, tender water erasing the granite. A phantom tracking the triptych as pivot, as hydro flows into hydro. It is my personal theory of dispersion. Sensory overload used for CIA experiments said one tremendous wave to the other tremendous wave that came from thousands of miles away, and the first raised its voice and the second lowered its voice, and so on and so forth, and the waves had a long conversation with each other, talked of what they had lost. Have you left anything in the world you didn't wash away by flood? Asked the first wave. I have been burned by the vapor of many stars, replied the second. It is a sort of sensory deprivation they suffer from, said the first wave. And then the two waves softly decayed on the stretched beach, and they could tell from the smell of the sand in the desert that it was spring. The way sound fluctuates almost indefinitely, and they felt the two sides of the water wrap around the birds. They could hear in the oranges ripening on the trees more inland, and the gentle frenzy of bees, and the little girl walking towards a mirage, passing the mirage into the real water, and they could reach very far into her little iris and could see the entire ocean in the background, which was the birthplace of waves, the little girl and the story, a generative repetition as the little girl picked the fruit and ate it quietly by herself. And this is the third one. He told the story of a hang glider who lost his arm in 1998, not flying, but rather hopping freights full of cattle, trains trembling with agitated meat that would not accept the adverse conditions of their demise, would not accept their direction of travel. And when the man returned home several months later to his northern town of Aurora Borealis, huckleberries, and hang gliders, all his hang glider friends had died due to the defective wings the company had manufactured. So we can see this irony as mythos, as the fringe of wind, that they died in the latent tower's downdraft, in the deep cyclonic ice, in the supercooled remnants where there remains a dense, vigorous orb, an iridescence, a cadence that wraps the flagrant urge eclipsed by bites, a spectrum of trauma-induced reckoning. Where was the man's arm? He knocked on the hexagonal pattern. I mean, he knocked on the door of what falters. I mean, he knocked on the door of the polyphonic, on what cannot resonate or establish itself in one eloquence. Their mouths, ears, eyes full of grapple, and grapple on their tongues as a charm, as language spiraling through waves, fire, centuries, towards earth, turning round and around as mechanism, as phenomenon. How lucky I am, thinks the man. I would like an omelet and coffee, thinks the man, who is now content to fade instead of the others. Manifold omen, a lull, so turbulent, I fold in, I fold in. I do have something to say about the second column of that. I really have much banter in between, or whatever you call it, the talk in between. But I was reading Talmud, like the Jewish text, and they had this story about a wave talking to another wave, and I just thought that was a really cool idea, and so I incorporated it into this poem, that poem anyway. It's now time for my Florida poem. I was asked to do someone from FSU, the college where I live in Tallahassee, art professor asked me to collaborate with her and a biologist, or no, not a plant. What is the plant people? What do they call it? Botanist, yes. And she made this book, and I was the person who wrote the poems, obviously. And so we went out in the forest, the Apalachicola forest, which is outside of, sort of surrounds Tallahassee. And so I wrote a poem about that experience. Okay. I think there are a few things. So there are turpentine pots, is where in Tallahassee, like in that area, and I don't think they did this here, but there were these sort of tree turpentine, sort of almost labor used, but not in a good way to make this turpentine. So if you go out into the forest, you can still find these turpentine clay pots. And so this is called Apalachicola Shattered Screen. And I guess it's kind of an ecological poem about North Florida, where I live. Hold a turpentine pot from the earth hole. Stand beside the foot of the bald cypress. Orotund sun squeezed from the cheap tree's pulp. My mind is a weather vane, an outdated paper map, and handful of sassafras leaves at your boots. Nicked my skin on sticky vines. Today trucks rumble the overwhelmed horizon. This swamp we love is heavier than any full moon. Orange milkweed, red, then ash, black, then a world of dogwoods taken. Then the turkey oaks consumed. The lake water gobbled and turned negative into this temperature's rise from the breaking of leaves and branches. The fur on the smallest mouse quivers. The deer and bear push further and further from laps of waves. The alligator motionless, one eye open, one closed, and you sat in your quiet house on the edge of the forest, drinking clementine tea and cutting teardrops upon teardrops from long pieces of butcher paper. And when they fell to the floorboards, you realized they could sing. Ink as pulp, pulp as work, work as bark, bark as sandhill, sandhill as frost grape as throat, throat as print, print as wild blueberry, wild blueberry as longing, longing as forest floor, forest floor as continuous, continuous as forest floor. You will find the dried lake north of a shaky I love you, west of the circle of live oaks. When you reach the sandhill indicators, take 300 steps backwards into those neuron bushes, and you will arrive at the bottom of no, really run your forefinger over the jagged cracks in the mud and follow the language lines to the tupelos that sit like ancients on the opposite shore. Did you get there? Was it worth it? Did you stuff a few flowers in your pocket? Vivid sunburned forms of heat rising as ghost plants from the circular hurricane-battered hole. The pines bend to the salted wind that tell and retell their watery shapes. A scrub jay flies through a hole of this spider's clever web, a plant that turns away when you touch it, exposed roots whose existence should have been carried out long ago, unharmed, underground. I scrolled through the pictures of the forest on the treadmill. Sweat dropped from my forehead to which blurred a few of the purple irises. I wiped it away. Another picture that doesn't do the cypress tree justice. I turned off CNN. Someone was reporting from the Capitol. This forest is unreal, I thought. Then you called. Do you even know the history of the treadmill? It was used for hard labor. It has a terrible history. 345 calories. 347 calories. I wanted to throw away the phone or to bury it under the dried, pixelated lake. But I also wanted to keep the forest with me at all times, wherever I went. Animal, animal, animal. Burrows in the zigzag silk grasses and sand. Hawks circle the overstory like eyes, or the way you look at something as it turns to longleaf pine. Is that the way you looked at me? Lost yourself in the network of sepia roads? June beetles soft on the disjunctive ridges, pearls of water, iridescent jewels make keystones like moon craters of floristic surveys. Last year's seed pods opened to silk fractals, open to scars on cypress trees left by early foresters. Fire pours from these pods as vines of ink spill across the Zurich forest, vines that grow with the earth's curvature. You stopped and looked at the sky, then across the acidic tea-colored water, then held your hand out to the pinks in the compound leaves. 7 years in the grass stage, pine just a tuft of needles. Other blades, glass-sharp fans of green, glass-sharp rays of sun, and more. The sharpness of a 50-year-old beer can, flakes of rust, half drowned in sand, a squinting sharpness of clammy heat, a torso-tight heat of eyes locked. That much of it, so much that you can't deny it will take you in your silly little heart, pumping wildly inside your silly little dehydrated body and won't let you go. Plant as diagram, diagram as species, species as whisper, whisper as muscadine grape, muscadine grape as sweet wine as gallberry. Run through the press as poetry, poetry as heavy silk. Heavy silk as overstory, overstory as Florida, Florida as vivid forms. You know, that reading that, it actually brings me back to this beautiful moment of not just nature, of course, but just being in collaboration with other artists and the botanists too. And I don't know, it makes me, not my own poem makes me cry, but it just makes me sad what we're doing to our world. Should I read one? What do you want me to do?
Read.
Okay.
Orlando.
Want me to read Orlando? No.
Not the whole.
Oh, that would take a long time.
The bad.
Ariel, I too have a love-hate relationship with Florida, but I do love the beauty, the natural beauty. This one is called, On the Way to the Shore, I Bought You a Bonsai Cypress Tree. I love and care for people, even if the social matrix does everything in its crude power to collapse intense feeling. even if every poem is subject to gross humiliations. Verging on the end, my mouth is full of antonyms, so I place a robust pot of blue tulips on the outdoor table as the sea collects its casualties. Read more frivolous articles. Much of the artwork comes from people who are remodeling their beach cabins, and from my husband, I must head off to a professional development workshop. These are the things we said as the disaster took hold. Containment zones widen into spring, where bulbs are flourishing from the devastating waters. Remember your origin, says the sea, ratcheting up its chaotic philosophy. I will hold you forever, since you are dearer to me than a metaphor dissolving in its own letters. Dawn begins in Florida's opulent greenhouse. This is nothing like memory. It is the sound of dripping, of Persephone evocative formulations. This is no scream. It is wood slowly rotting on the forest floor and the SIM card full sea calling out to be seen. I started with like kind of a feminist poem. I'm going to end with This one is called On Avondale and Riverside. It's kind of a pandemic-ish poem. On Avondale and Riverside, past the marble house full of punctuation and plants, deep where the tornado untwines its watch, what did you want, Valentine? In the shrine of sunshine, I lift my hoodie over my life, pain scale forward, thought your hands were pressed to my face, but I am walking into a glass window, you in Washington, prismatic, but no water. Is this landlocked person real? I asked my phone synapses strengthened by weed, astrology, therapy, and the mute button. You call from the Capitol and I throw my phone into the St. Johns River again. It's okay, you're used to it. Let's get fucked up and forget the pandemic. Forget the homicidal pantomimes with those pretties on screens where you're supposed to enact plenitude, but sink so far into the orchestration of money and shit. How long will I walk away into these lush hours? The ones unspent and togethers incarnadine never did take the olive tree out of its bucket. The leaves slowly fell off and I felt awful, didn't have the heart to garden or compost, songs or disease, long lists of food I can and cannot eat, the physical aspects, crumbling, weight loss, mysterious appearances, a blue dress hanging from a low cloud, makeup turning up, and my mailbox shaped like a cottage, all the wrong colors but still applied them diligently. Touchdown on Mars, the mailbox collapsed. A 7th grader biking down the street was jumped by 3 kids. I said, do you want some water? He was crying. I thought, don't look at me like that. Please don't look at me like that. Like what? Like an animal. It is the white flower that roars, a catastrophic tryst with undulating cumulonimbus clouds, the dripping of water from a fawn-shaped fountain, happenstance in green, someone vacuum cleaning their living room on a Sunday. Oh, love, I don't want to see them anymore, the ghosts of my life, of yours. Can our togetherness short circuit? But no. The refinery wavers. The men trickle out with their lunch boxes. The salt air chemicals sting, sting, sting. It is not a dream. It is everything you hoped to forget but couldn't. It is splashed blood on the boardwalk across from the oceanic feeling you say you've never experienced. Well, I have. I do. Every day. I'm sorry I can't help you. I don't know how to speak the language of the dead. Why do men have to kill the women they can't have in poems? Like Richard Hugo's The Lady in Kicking Horse Reservoir, even as sublimation, a sickness, a devouring and devaluing, like the guy who tells you, I love you, I love you, I love you. And why do the women in the 1980s creative writing workshop nod along to his stupid story? No, you don't love me, dickhead. You just want your hands to turn to weeds so they can brush my dead face at the bottom of your lake.
Wow. One more time for Sandra Simonds, everybody. That's not going to work. All right, we'll just do this. Sandra, you got me thinking about collaboration. And before we close out, I think I'd like to just say a few words on that. And I'm thinking about everybody here. I'm thinking about the collaboration of the audience and the performer to the performer. The concept of poetry is collaborating with all of us. The idea, it's got to have labor in it, right? Collab, co-labor, co-laboring. Yeah, that's my fact checker right there. You all put in the work tonight. We heard great work tonight. I think each and every one of you, I think the readers, we all at Splice just want to say thank you to everyone. It took work to get here. There was something about going to see poetry that you decided to put the work in, get in your car, hop on your bike, ride the bus, and come to this space. That is so meaningful. Each and every one of you then is a culture maker. And that's what we at Splice are all about. Because Splice is ending now, in a way, but it's not. We're gonna keep splicing. Splice is gonna follow us out the door. And so, what was it? The creaky, gooey staircase of the self that you're walking down?
Stringy.
Stringy, meaty. You can take Splice with you there. We'll come along. So I just wanted to end on that note. But of course, one final big round of applause for Ariel and Sandra. Thank you so much.